Hello, good evening or good morning, depending on where you are or whether you're watching this on catch-up. It could be good afternoon. Welcome to the last of these sessions on today's, I guess they're kind of like conversation pieces as part of the Good Business Festival. So the Good Business Festival, I'm certain you're aware, it's a celebration of how we can do good and do business at the same time. It's probably clear and fair that business created many of the societal environmental problems that we see around us, but there's one thing for certain, it's probably the only thing that can help clear them up, particularly if we can reevaluate, reformat, maybe even recalibrate business so that it does more good than bad. And the regenerative economy as a concept is becoming more and more important, and it is way bigger than sustainability, of which it's, it kind of heralds it comes from. But this whole idea of the regenerative economy is something that builds rather than subtracts is really, really important. And the last session we've got today, I'm super excited. We've got some amazing, I'm going to call them speakers, but they could be participants, depending on what you call them. We've got Pablo Handel, who I thought was in Sao Paulo, but he isn't. He's in Rio de Janeiro. And Pablo Pablo was on the previous session, so I've just had a really interesting conversation with him around purpose. He co-founded the Impact Hub in Sao Paulo in 2006, and is an invested board member of Impact Hub Florianopolis, Mano, and Belo Horizonte. He studied business administration, theatre, pedagogy, and my favorite misspelling of the day, meditation of conflicts, but of course it's mediation of conflicts. Although, to be honest, I think they're quite similar. While he was in Austria, and he's worked in India and the Netherlands, where he serves as a strategist and designer of development processes. He's recently moved to from Sao Paulo to Rio, where he lives with his wife and two daughters, taking surfing lessons. I'm very jealous, and working on projects seeking a balanced and more purposeful life. I admire that, and I think we probably all want a bit of that. And then next up, we've got Alberto Alonso, who's just joined us. Alberto is head of ecosystem development at Impact Hub Madrid. Welcome, Alberto. He's passionate about consultancy and social innovation, and is concerned with the world and its future. He's an expert in project management, formulating and executing technically and financially. Curious and restless, that's a good combination. Curious and restless, I like that. He lived and worked in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. In the afternoons, Alonso volunteers as a musician, a sportsman, a university teacher, and an economic opinion columnist as well. So welcome, and what a busy life you have. And then finally, last but not least, we have Helen Heap, Helen is in Liverpool, one of my favorite cities. Helen is a social investor and the founder of CEO Seabohm Hill, a Liverpool-based social investment consultancy. She spent more than 2 decades working in financial services as an analyst, equity salesperson, and investor, mostly specializing in Japanese equities. Japanese interest rates as well. Was that a big part of your job, Helen? Did you have to wrestle that kind of dragon? Since 2011, Helen has worked with a number of social organizations, social investors, and the Cabinet Office in roles involving the measurement and reporting of social value, investment due diligence, and the research of social finance market. For years, we could only measure how a business did by its returns to shareholders, because they were the best metrics at the time that we created the regulations around business responsibility. That no longer matters. That no longer exists. It still matters. That no longer exists. Look, there's nothing wrong with profit, right? You're not a business if you're not making a profit. So these things really matter, but we can measure the other things that they do as well. So what we're talking about today is capitalism after COVID. If any of you attendees, I'm just going to turn the chat on, want to ask questions, please type in the chat box. We've got someone joined us from Ontario, Canada. Please, anything you want to type in there, put a question in, and that'll get relayed to me, or I can read it and I'll read it out. But before any of that, let's have a conversation, or let's have an introduction from each of the people. Pablo, would you like to tell me who you are, what you do, and why you matter?
Good to be here again, Mark. Wonderful to be with you, Helen and Alberto. So I co-founded the Impact Hub in 2006 with a fellow friend of mine, and I remember the reason why we started it is because we kind of had nothing to lose. I was kind of on a sabbatical coming from Europe to Brazil, stayed for a year, so basically had a year off, and that kind of gave me a chance to kind of look around where's innovation happening, where the people who are actually going to change Brazil, and they're not in the newspaper. You can't find them anywhere, so I had to kind of ask people like who they admire, and this is how the Impact Hub developed. We look for people who actually do amazing things and are under the radar, and look for ways to support them. And eventually this became a business, and eventually this became part of a large network with more than 101 Impact Hubs, which purpose is to actually support impact entrepreneurs, develop communities of impact entrepreneurs, and work together with foundations, government, and corporate to actually solve social issues. So this is what my life has been about this. My parents are social activists, work with refugees, work with indigenous, and I wanted to always keep that, but bring sort of the business aspect to this conversation, bring sort of the business appeal to it, and combine these two worlds. We seem so apart, at least for my growing up as a kid. And these days I'm basically still very much engaged in that, but I'm also in the moment of passing on sort of this to a new generation of entrepreneurs. I'm working that I'm sort of like changing the mindset around being socially driven and making money and making profit is something good, and that's something that's needed. And I believe that mental models is basically what surrounds us, and that's what we need to kind of work on. And the reason I matter is because I've been on this path for more than 20 years, and I've never had a corporate career. I never kind of changed my career. This has been my career since ever. And I think it inspires others to move in that direction. And probably do it even much better than I do, kind of build on what I've done and take it to the next level. But I've kind of been one of the pioneering figures in this field. And I think it's good to have such people around because they can inspire and they can enable and support. And I'm slowly becoming sort of an investor, as also the business becomes more successful, kind of how can we fuel back to that system and do small kinds of investments that at least fit into our pockets. But I think it's our responsibility to keep nurturing that field. And so I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Brilliant, thank you. And Pablo, I mean, I love this idea of you growing up in a household that was purpose-driven, that was working with, your mum and dad did work that was kind of humanitarian in one way or another. What do they think of what you do now? How do the conversations at Christmas go?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, I don't think they feel like we're very much distant, but it feels like different. They still feel like I'm in a different world, because the world of a business, even if it's socially driven, is fairly different. Because I grew up in a household where people were more looking for a job. My parents were often very unemployed. And so there was a suffering around that sort of feeling of being unemployed, and that brings problems. And I took another path, which is more like building my own business, building my own businesses, and so on. And so even though it's socially driven, it feels like almost worlds apart. However, they're very curious, and of course they're proud, and as parents are usually. But we can, the more I'm advanced, the more I can actually have professional conversations with them as well now these days. So there seems to be confluent again as we grow into a new phase as well. So I think it's just a completely different mindset, because my parents came from an NGO approach, like sure. Fundraising, and it's different to what we do.
But there's a really rich area for conversation, because if you can't look after yourself, then you can't look after anybody else. And to have those periods of unemployment because you want to find a job to help other people, that must have been really tough, actually. So look, thank you for that lovely, beautiful little slice and look inside young Pablo's growing up life. I really appreciate that. And next on my list is Alberto. Alberto, tell me who you are, tell me what you do, and tell me why you matter.
Well, my name is Alberto. I come from Madrid, but I'm now in Barcelona. I became part of the network three years ago, Impact Hub Network, and it was through Impact Hub Donostia in the Basque Country in Spain. And I got in as a volunteer host, and I remember when I started to realize what was going on inside the Impact Hub, I got like smashed. It was like, oh, come on, you know, I was looking for this. And it was because after 6 months I was working inside, and then I became a partner, a cooperativist of the Impact Hub Donostia, and now I'm involved in opening Impact Hub Barcelona. That's why I'm here. So this is really my passion right now. Beforewards, I was like Pablo's fathers, because I used to work in an NGO, different NGOs in Asia and South America mainly. And I really like this approach, but I had the lack of something. And what I like the most from this new perspective that Impact Hub and the entrepreneurship gave me was the possibility to become a maker right now, right here. So it is not like, okay, you know, like politics, they are very important for changing. Demonstration, lobbying, then you need academia, you need the reflection on things, you need universities, you know, you need studying about this. But this is about what can you do from your side, from your own, right here, right now. And the entrepreneurship is a very, very good choice on this. And I really like that. I felt like 100% into it, and this is why.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic. That is. And when you're looking for people to come into the hub, when you're looking or you're screening, what is the magic ingredient that you're looking for in a business or a person?
A hub is a mix of, you know, a hub, a daily hub is lots of people coming in and coming out. But I like to emphasize is people. And inside these people, you have to see across and you have to detect talent. You know, there's lots of people excited about changing things, and this is great, but it's not about excitement or motivation. It's much more, you know, it's about constancy, it's about keeping going, it's about, you know, like being called here, lots of skills. And this, you know, the complete picture is talent. So for me, a good hub boss is the guy who can detect this, see straight ahead, and can bring opportunities to these people that might come looking for them.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we've got Helen. And Helen, can someone pop Helen on the grid with me? That'd be amazing. Hello. Helen, can you tell me who you are, what you do, and why you matter?
Okay, so I'm Helen. As you said, I'm currently now based in Liverpool in the UK, which is a fantastic city for lots of reasons. I've spent the first 25 years of my career in what you might call conventional finance. So I was working, the last two employers were Goldman Sachs and a hedge fund in London. So I've worked on Wall Street, I've worked in the City of London, which was very exciting, and you know, lots of interesting interactions. Some fantastically talented people work in those financial markets. I got to a stage in my life, I don't know whether you call it a midlife crisis or just I've been doing it for long enough that I just became increasingly disillusioned with moving massive amounts of money around, which was basically for the benefit of rich people who wanted to get richer. And all the while being very aware that there were lots of problems in my own community, in my own country, in the world, where actually relatively small amounts of money, if deployed in the right way, could make a massive difference. And yet none of the money that I was seeing flowing through the financial markets was getting anywhere close to tackling some of those problems. I got to the point in 2011 where I just thought, a little bit like Alberto, needed to do something. I wanted to be involved in making a difference, and making money work for communities that needed the money, rather than the other way around, where communities have to work for money normally. So I left the city and spent quite a lot of time really just trying to understand how the skill set and the knowledge that I'd accumulated in those 25 years might be usefully deployed in a more socially useful way. And I ended up coming to Liverpool in 2013, where I basically set up my own business, which originally was designed to be kind of like a brokerage, so to connect social entrepreneurs and social businesses that were looking for capital with investors who wanted to provide that capital. But pretty quickly I realized that actually those different people speak very different languages. So the money people speak money, and social people speak social, and there's actually very little overlap in between, and they don't understand each other, which is part of the problem as to why the money never gets to the social organizations. So for the first 5 years, I guess, of me being in Liverpool, I basically just researched social organizations in Liverpool, in the northwest of England and elsewhere, trying to understand what it was that they needed, why the money that was out there at the moment wasn't getting to them, and how can we bridge that gap. So I ended up doing some work. I'm a visiting fellow at the University of Liverpool, and I ended up doing a couple of pieces of research for them, which really are sort of set a baseline for understanding what the social economy looks like in the Liverpool City region. And that has proven to be quite useful in that it now helps to sort of bridge that gap and to at least go some way towards enabling the finance people to understand the social, and the social people to understand the finance. And then more recently, so for the last year or so, I've been on the back of that research. I've been very closely involved with an initiative here in the Liverpool City region, which is called Kindred. And that is really trying to redesign and do money and business support in a very, very different way. So yeah, I'll probably leave it there, but trying to make the money work for the social organizations, and to get the social organizations the support that they need on the terms that they need it, while still meeting the needs of funders.
Helen, the work you do is amazing, and you've touched on 3 or 4 issues that form the center of what we're talking about today in terms of capitalism. And I get this really strong image of someone sat helping other people make money and not seeing it directed. If we were to redirect some of the market money into social good, do we get an equivalent return, or do we get a less return, or do we get an enhanced return over traditional risk-based investments?
It depends how you're defining return. So I feel very strongly that there are a lot of people who will say that you can get a good financial return and social impact at the same time. In developing economies where, if you're bringing electricity to a place that doesn't have electricity, for instance, or you're bringing clean water to a place that doesn't have clean water, that is true. You will be able to get financial returns and social returns. In a mature economy like the UK, where the kind of problems we're having to tackle, things like food poverty, things like inadequate social care, those are much, much more difficult problems, and the economics of that is much more difficult. So the costs of delivering those sort of solutions are much, much higher than they are in either developing countries or for other sort of more market-oriented solutions. So I think I am a social investor myself, and I will usually say that I will not be looking for a commercial financial return, a market financial return, if I can see that there is social impact being delivered, and I only invest in things that are delivering social impact. So I think you have to have a trade-off. But there are people out there who think that is not the case, that you can have both financial return and social return.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we've got a couple of questions to kick things off, and you're welcome to ask questions of each other, and then hopefully we'll get some in on the chat as well. But obviously we've just come through the most, have we come through it? Obviously we've just had the most incredible 6 months, in as much as it's impossible to believe it. And it isn't just COVID and the pandemic. We've also seen Black Lives Matter take a meaningful and an important turn and change perception in a way that it hadn't before, and that's a positive. We've seen an environmental crisis begin to be understood by industry and by people, and obviously we've had a global pandemic, and we're still in the grips of a global pandemic. Have any of these things, has this last 6 months been a catalyst for any change or development in your work and within the wider economy? And I'll start with Pablo.
Well, that's an emergent field, right? I mean, understanding, sort of reading the signs and reading sort of the trends and what can we interpret. Well, I think there's three phenomena, I think, which kind of caught my attention the last month. So the first one is a more macro phenomenon. I think it was unimaginable that an entire world can almost simultaneously shut down the systems, right? An engine that was almost seen as you cannot stop it, and kind of as an excuse or for just keeping the system that's really actually not working because it's just polluting our environment, it's just not socially just, and so on. Just keep it going. And I think for more or less we have turned it down to actually an extent that we've never seen before, which for me shows us that we have the capacity if the pressure is high enough. The second phenomena is the phenomena of collaboration, of really micro and macro collaboration happening, like in Brazil, whether it is in the neighborhoods, whether it's in the houses, whether it's across organizations. I've seen a collaboration that I've never seen before happening. Whether that's the collaboration of capital, I can maybe give a little bit of an example of kind of really interesting new setups of financing projects where philanthropy and capital and market capital comes together to work together, which I've never seen before, which was always a dream, but unimaginable. And I think the last one is really a sense of community. I think signification of what it means to be in community, families, or extended families, around kindergartens, our caring of elders, and so on. So I think there are some systemic shifts, maybe they're in a very, very initial, which I think we're longing for as a sort of, but we're kind of not really having sort of the momentum to get there. And for me, that's really sort of being able to really look at the system and seeing how can we turn it down and kind of, or turn it up just in a different way. Two is really collaboration around, players that actually don't collaborate. And the third is the need for being really in community again, when we have lost it in many, many ways. At least in Brazil, it's been very evident that there's such an interdependence that if you're not in community, then we will not survive any crisis. And this is just part of the resilience that we need. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I think it's just to get the ball rolling. This is what I've seen, and I've been very inspired of all the three phenomena, and I'm looking forward to hear more what others you have detected and what others you have observed, because I think this is the question that we all have, right? What's going to happen? What is happening? What can we extract as good, right?
What does it mean? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I love about what you just said there was that you said if you're not part of a community, then you won't get through another crisis like this. That was really powerful. And one of the things that I've observed, and I wonder if it's the same in Brazil, is I've seen a shift towards more smaller scale and independent businesses in terms of where consumers want to spend their money. And I wonder if that will reverse when we come out of this process. Has the same phenomenon been noted in Brazil, where people have begun to go to kind of smaller, maybe more expensive, but maybe more trusted organizations?
Well, I can't really speak for on a large scale, but what I definitely see is that as we have not been able to move around a lot, I think this connectedness to the businesses that are local, because if they break down, then I'm not going to have a supermarket, I'm not going to have a grocery store, that people from the groceries have kids in the school that my kids are. So that sort of looking at really sort of the slow economies, like slowing down the way we consume and really start noticing what we consume and how, I think is definitely a phenomena that I've seen pretty much across my professional and personal networks. I think yes, I agree with you. I think it's a trend. And I think that's the beauty of it, that these local relationships, this community relationships, community economies kind of seem that they are becoming more aware to such a variety of people who actually would never care normally, right? Because it's more comfortable just ordering the internet. I've seen people just ordering something as groceries in the internet because they drop it at home. But then so with time, kind of like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, it just needs to go so far away. The cost of transportation or transaction cost is so huge. And so not even considering the carbon footprint and so on. So I think this is the beauty of maybe this is one of the things that we can relate to, like, why do we consume of whom we care about, right? And I think this is something that's going to stay, I think, at some way or the other.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Alberto, same question to you. Has the changes we've seen over the last 6 months been a catalyst for any change or development in your work and within the wider economy?
Well, I think what Pablo said about people collaborating, things never seen before, me neither in Spain. I mean, like, people really show they can trust each other, they can build nets in order to help community, to help in the neighborhood, the families, or even the town or the city. And this is very important because for me, there was also a big contrast with the countries were doing in the first wave. Back in March, if you remember, the countries were competing for breathing machines. They were like trying to buy masks for $60 one mask, and the best bidder was the country they got it, and it was crazy how they competed. They competed because, I mean, like, that's the market, my friend. You deliver all the resources to the market, and now you depend on the market. And now, when a crisis comes, you can do either compete with others for the resources or cooperate, joining with others. And for me, this is a very important point that was raised by this crisis, which is this double choice, competing or cooperating. And for me, cooperating was the secret, because I saw it in the small communities I lived in, and even in the hubs we run. And on the other hand, another thing that changed in the hub and the possibilities in our work is like, it didn't happen before also, but it was very crazy to see how, when the economy stops, the planet, the environment is happier. And it is like, what the hell? What are we doing with the economy? And is there a way to build a trust economy, employment of quality, where we can like have welfare for everyone. At the same time, like we don't push or you know, throw things to the environment. And this dichotomy is very interesting because we had many examples in our hub that people and institutions that are getting closer to us because perhaps the social entrepreneurship and the environmental entrepreneurship is the perfect mix to join you know, environmental responsibility and economy. And is that possible? Well, it is. It is through circular economy, is to observing the nature in order to see business model. There's no trash in nature, there's no bin, there's just resources, there's lots of things to see. But we need to switch, you know, we need to reset. And I think we need to take advantage of what we lived in this 2020, and we can build on a new perspective, you know.
That's really interesting. I mean, I really enjoyed that conversation when you were talking about competition versus cooperation, and how the original approach was to compete, and probably still was in the UK's approach to buying PPE, if I'm honest. How that shifted towards cooperation. Does that shift contradict one of the central philosophies of capitalism? Is there some real kind of like a contradiction, weakening of the central tenets of capitalism within that?
Well, I think like if we go to 19th century of capitalism, there was at some point somebody said like being mean is good for society. I mean, like to invest money and to take back the money for the companies and to be mean, you know, it's going to be good for your community. It's going to be more employment. It's gonna make everything work. Perhaps is one of the outcomes, but there's obviously another outcomes, and it's through globalization. There's always the same losers, for example. But now there is a new door in the last 30 years that is like resources are not endless. In the 19th century, in the foundation of the capitalism, as a methodology, as a system, economical system, there wasn't this variable, you know, like to put inside the cooking machine. So now we have this new door, and it's coming, it's gonna get open, and we don't know what is at the other side of the door. Everybody is speaking what we will be and how we can, you know, keep the door closed, but actually scientists and United Nations and, you know, all the serious institutions are telling us it's going to be very dangerous to open this door. Somehow we keep going through this door, you know.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Helen, from your perspective, has the pandemic been or have the changes we've seen over the last 6 months been a catalyst for any change or development in your work and within the wider economy?
Yeah, sure. I can think of a couple of examples. So here in Liverpool, we have a regional government which is relatively recently formed and was really just starting to get to grips with what powers they had. So they sort of set themselves up with all the processes that you would expect from the public sector in terms of how they operate, very bureaucratic, and lots of safeguards and lots of compliance and governance around everything that they did. And then when the pandemic hit, they realized that they couldn't move at that speed or fit everything within those processes. And it turns out that actually, you know what, they can move quickly and they can collaborate. So I totally agree with what Pablo and Alberto have said. Definitely seen a lot of collaboration and cooperation. And I'll add another C into this as well. So even co-design. So where it was clear that what went before isn't going to work and we need a different solution, there has been much more of an appetite, I think, during the pandemic for people in the public sector in particular, across all of the sectors, say, actually, we do need to do things differently. We need to be quicker, we need to be leaner, we need to be responsive to demands that are out there. And it turns out, you know what, you perhaps don't need all of the processes behind you to actually make decisions, and money can be allocated quite quickly. It can be found in places that who knew there may be money actually available. It may just be a little sweet spot that we're in at the moment that may or may not last, but there have definitely been pots of money that have been made available in ways that just would not have been the case previously. So that's definitely one example. Then perhaps something a little bit off the wall, the whole doing everything like this, everything on Zoom. So I do lots of things with charities, with education, parts of the economy where digital was really just a pipe dream, and it was something that was going to happen to other people in the future. And then overnight, it's now come everybody. And so from a productivity point of view and from a working practices point of view, that's going to fundamentally change, and particularly in education. So secondary schools here in Liverpool are having now to deliver lessons online because we've got COVID and we have very high rates of infection. So we're having quite a struggle at the moment with some of our schools having to close or having to not be available for certain groups of pupils. We can't stop educating them. We have to find a way of providing the education that those students deserve. And so the whole move online, I think, I don't think we even appreciate at the moment what impact it's going to have in the future. It's definitely been a catalyst for change that will be fundamental and very, very widespread.
I completely agree with all of that. The co-design thing's fast. I run co-design workshops in the flesh, and I didn't think I'd be able to do them online. I can unify those two things. There was never a problem with the technology. There was a problem with how we thought about the technology. And that point about education, Helen, is beautifully made. You know, at a time when higher education is increasingly expensive for increasingly little return, maybe a solution is popped up that can make that more widespread and reduce costs as well. So there's some real nuggets in that. Thank you very much. Thank you all for that one. What are some of the positives or change perspectives that business can take from the pandemic to drive their work in the future? Are there any new economic models emerging? Are we tinkering with the mechanics of capitalism? I'll go with I'll go with Helen first, thinking about it.
Yeah, I think people have seen that new ways are possible, and that it's not maybe as scary as you might think. It's been done out of necessity, and so I think, you know, we've seen that there's a political will and the willingness to be collaborative and to co-design, that things can happen. And previously, people who have not even been together, again, I think maybe the technology means that it's easier to get different groups from different environments and different perspectives together now. So I think that is a catalyst for change, and it's something that is definitely as a result of this. I think one of the things that we've seen in my world here in Liverpool City region is that entrepreneurs and social businesses will find a way. So they've had to change the way they do things. So, you know, we had all of the hospitality and food and drink and tourism related businesses were just closed down overnight, but they had to adapt, and those businesses have found a way of adapting, pivoted their model. So we've had biking groups, cycling groups that were previously leisure and sort of tourist oriented, are now delivering food for people who were housebound. We've got organisations that were providing employment related support using sewing. Okay, so the employment related bit now maybe isn't there, but what has happened is that people have been coming together to make scrubs and masks and PPE for healthcare workers, etc. So there's been a lot of people being able to see opportunity where perhaps the initial reaction is there's just been a black hole just opened up because your business has just disappeared overnight. So particularly if you can put in the right support. So one of the things that we've been doing with Kindred, so the COVID situation meant we actually sped up and accelerated some of the delivery work that was originally planned to be taking place later this year. Well, that was swung into action as soon as the pandemic hit. As a result of that, we were able to provide some very intensive peer-to-peer support for the social organisations and socially trading businesses in the Liverpool City region. And just that provision of a little bit of a safety net, a network. It may only have been doing what we're doing now, just having a chat and saying, how are you doing, checking in with people, what help do you need, how can we support you? But that actually made a big difference. And then once the funding started to come through as well, we could then support people, support those organisations to access some essential funding as well. So that was a real positive in terms of being able to just speed things up and do things in a way that was relatively free of bureaucracy.
It's interesting, isn't it, how fast people reacted and how fast some businesses changed their model. You know, my friend who's in North Wales, not a million miles from you, turned his pub into a shop overnight. Just was like, we haven't got a village shop, now we have, and he made good money out of it. It was a service, and it was good for him. And there's another one in London called it was called Top Cuvée. It was a really expensive bar, and it just overnight became a delivery service and shop. And making those decisions quickly helped people through for certain. But those kind of business model changes, they can be really subtle. I mean, they're both quite subtle changes. They're not revolutionary, but suddenly you've got this whole different world open up. And the cycle courier examples are lovely. Thank you. Okay, Alberto, the same question to you. Are we seeing new economic models emerging? What are the positive change perspectives that have fallen out of this?
Well, building on what you said, I think world is changing, and it's changing fast. And this crisis show lots of small businesses can also change very fast. And this is a good thing, because there's always like mental barriers that makes you all the time thinking in the same way, and in a moment of crisis, you know, like you have to move, and this crisis show this skill, which is very important to entrepreneur. I think there's we are not very conscious right now about what's going to happen because of the 2020 year in 10 years. But I think in 10 years, we can, if you guys want, we can meet again and we can look back and say, wow, you know, because there's lots of spheres that they are opening now. I'm going to name two, but probably there's like dozens more. First of all, is what you said before, Mark. People is not really trusting anymore what is important for them, but is made 1,000 kilometers away. They realize they prefer it from the town nearby, and this is also a switch or a change of the globalization we have in our heads. globalization can be different. It's not like we can go backwards through the last stage. You know, like we need to set a new globalization, and it needs to be based in new paradigms. One of them can be this. You know, we can join all together from different countries right here. We can maybe travel. We can do lots of things in an economic way, sharing lots of things. But we can, or we should maybe keep some of the things in the town nearby, as I said, you know. And this is starting to, lots of like movements or politics are starting to realize and to speak out. On the other hand, secondly, I want to speak about the distance working, because the possibility of the technology. Distance working for me is also a thing that storm out and is going to get increasing and increasing and increasing, and it's going to change lots of things. For example, cities are not going to be as important as they used to be, because lots of people that are now living in cities because of their workplaces, they can go back to the town, they can go back to the yard and enjoy countryside, and also enjoy it cheaper, much cheaper than in big cities. But this is just the beginning, because the public transport in big cities is thought to move the workforce. But now workforce is not going to move as before, because maybe it's going to be not just 5 days working in the office, but 1. So this also changed the way we need to think about mobility inside the cities. And this is going to essentially reflect also in the footprint of the transport. There's lots of different spheres. And this is, for me, this is just the beginning. It's not going to be a revolution. It's going to, now we start seeing small things that are going to be very important in the next few years.
That's really fascinating, and I can feel the impact on cities immediately. You know, are we going to see the hollowing out of cities where everybody wants to flee to either a smaller scale city, somewhere like Liverpool, infinitely more preferable to living in somewhere like central London, and are we going to see people, you know, flood to the countryside and leave cities as real estate with money tied up? The capital is doing nothing. Is this going to bring the death of cities, Alberto?
Well, I'm afraid it won't be the end of the cities, but it's definitely a kickoff of a new way to create or to understand cities. And this is hope, because we can do much better, can we?
For certain, absolutely. Thank you. And then, you know, the same question to Pablo. So, what are the positives or the change perspectives? What new business models have we seen emerge as a result of this situation?
The image that I have is that at some point somebody turned off the light in our houses. You know, we got blind, and now we had to kind of learn to do all the things that we've been doing, washing our dishes, you know, taking a shower, cooking blindly. And first thing is despair. Oh my God, what's gonna happen? It's like, oh my God, I can't do it. But slowly we find ways, right? And we start cooking without seeing. We start doing the things that we don't see, and so on. So you can take it. You can imagine what I'm saying. And suddenly somebody's gonna turn on the light again. And suddenly we have this additional capabilities that we've never imagined that we're gonna have on top of it. So our repertoire of how to do things will increase dramatically in from 2020 on. And this new mix, this remix of capabilities, of possibilities, I think will bring the real innovation. Because now what we are still doing is basically doing everything with our eyes shut or a little bit open, but most of the time we're still working in that kind of new mode, as we do here, for example. And let me just give you an example of what I think is gonna change in terms of perception, because I think that's the first thing that needs to change, is the perception of it. Before the really economic model changes, I think the perception comes before that. I wonder how many people now value kindergarten and childcare more than have done before. I can count, 100% of the people I know have never valued so much childcare. And especially in my age right now, people have kids, the kids are still young and they're 3-4 years old. People are desperate. So I think the price for school is going to go up, at least if it comes to a market price of offer and demand. So this is the first thing. I think there's a lot of change of perception happening in that field. 2, I think there is a great change of perception in terms of what the need of travel, right? This is no kidding. Before the pandemic, I was on a plane every Thursday or Wednesday in the morning and would come back in the evening. I would fly to Sao Paulo, where my office is. I would go take a car, go to the plane, take a plane, it's 45 minutes, get on the plane, take a cab to my office, have 3 to 5 meetings, go to have dinner, meet a couple of friends. In the morning, go to the office, have a couple of meetings, go back to cab, take the plane, be home in the evening, to actually have a few meetings, right? Because why? It's because people think that their leader needs to be in the office at least once a week. And this is things I've heard. This is not because I believe that I'm so important. This is what I've heard. Today, nobody cares anymore where I am. Nobody cares where I am anymore. It's a change of perception, right? And I think that sort of remix, right, of perception will actually happen in this reintegration of seeing and being able to do things while we're blind. I think this is going to bring the real innovation. The remix is really important for me, and that's where I think the innovation comes. Everything Alberto said, I think the working relationship, going from being sort of rented out for being in the office all day to actually what cares really is about the kind of results that I deliver. So from time-based working to delivery-based or results-based or product-based, I think that changes completely the way people relate to their working, their trusting relationship. That changes how leadership will come. I know a lot of middle management who want to go back to the office desperately. And the reason why is because at home they have to start caring up their kids. And actually they don't have the patience for that because it is difficult. I know what I'm talking about. And 2, they need to be the strong leader in the office because that's where they can be that sort of alpha male personality. So, and that will happen.
I'd add a third to that as well. We are defined by our job titles and we are meaningless when we don't have them.
Yeah, and that will change because that will be less important. And I know a lot of people will push coming back to the office as soon as possible rather than keeping remote work because it is where our archetypes, our identities are very much anchored. And so this change of perception, self-perception, the perception of others, I think is what's going to unfold slowly. And I think that some people will feel it's very painful for them, and some people will feel it's a liberation, right? And that's okay. And that's okay. So there will be a time of transition in the next 5 to 10 years. There will be this remix of relation because now it's like, how do we do this? We can do all of it? How do we remix this? It feels like a DJ, right? Like the economy is coming back. Like there's a DJ happening, and we can be the DJs.
So we're not throwing the record away. We're remixing it. I like that. That's a brilliant analogy. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to finish off, we've got 4 minutes left, and I've got one question. And we've only got a minute each, realistically. Is capitalism in its current form fit for purpose? And I'll start with Alberto.
Well, I think capitalism is not prepared to sort out the big problems we are facing right now, and we need to work on this. I'm afraid we need to get on with it, and we need to change the way we understand capitalism and globalization. And this is also related with the way we live daily. As Pablo said, you know, the week he used to have, and sometimes, you know, like realize all of us, like we need to change the way we make sustainable our way of life and the way we consume, and this is gonna be painful. But there's no other option, and it is a matter of understanding, and collaboration. Because for me, this is how we can change this perception, through collaboration, making these kind of things more, speaking more about this, proving like the social entrepreneurships that Helen invests are wealth and are creating welfare, and all of this, you know, is collaborating to this new and necessary way.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Pablo, is capitalism in its current form fit for purpose? Just a really quick answer.
I think it's having a very intense learning curve.
Lovely,
and
really well put.
It's far away still, but I think the direction to a more, and let me use a word that I've read here, to a more sacred economy, I think is there. I think maybe we'll come soon to kind of a level of sustainable economy. But I think where we have to go is really sort of redefining the relationships. And I think there's stages of evolution. Maybe in 20 years' time, we're not going to talk anymore about sustainable economies. We're going to talk about just or sacred, or a more elevated ambition for economy. Economy just being a vehicle of transaction, but economy being a vehicle of being in community. And I think that's where I think the road is heading. But it's, you know, it's a long road ahead. So
we're way off
today. No, we're in the gym. We're in the gym. We have to create a new muscles.
We've got to work it out.
We use.
Thank you.
I'm an optimist.
And then finally, that's good. I can sense that. Helen, is capitalism fit for purpose? Can we co-design a new capitalism, Helen?
No, it's not fit for purpose. Yes, we can co-design, because we're already doing it in the Port City region with Kindred. We need to really rethink what we mean about risk and return. So risk, very, very high when the money thinks that it's got all the answers and it tries to impose their solutions on everybody else. Much lower risk if you're working with people who understand the problems that they're dealing with, and they are the best people to solve those problems. You just need to listen to what it is that they need. And return, it's, as we started out very early on in this conversation, it's not just financial returns. Return is much, much wider and broader than that. If we only look at financial returns, we'll end up, as we have, with a race to the bottom. If we invest in people and their potential, then we have the prospect of a much better, wider return that benefits everybody. And that's how you get a truly inclusive economy.
Amazing. Thank you all. We've run out of time, but just perfect timing, actually. I can't thank you you three enough. That was brilliant, incredible conversations, and actually really hopeful conversations. I'm left feeling positive and up, and a massive thank you to anyone who's watching, those of you watching on Zoom, and then there's a load of others watching on Facebook Live. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate that. Also, a massive thanks to Wayne and Geraldine and the team at Hemingway for pulling the event together. But most of all, my thanks go to the team at Ethos. So we've got Andrew, Fiona, and Eve who are active today, and other compatriots. You've curated an amazing day, and I'm really touched to have been asked to host it. So thank you all for being involved, and thank you for having the foresight to have such great conversations. Whatever you do this evening, late afternoon, Pablo, have an amazing afternoon, and thank you for your time. Cheers.
Thank you.